Drink beer, it's good for you.
Hello and welcome to the video. In this video I will be comparing these three larger all-in-one brewing systems, having now completed a suitable number of brews with each to offer an honest and full opinion. This comparison will focus on the various relevant factors that are vital in making an informed decision between these systems. Here is my full disclosure declaration. Feel free to read it in full by pausing this video. In brief, my channel is unsponsored and private. I do work in the homebrew industry and distribution of equipment from many brands. The company I work for sells both the Brewzilla and Grainfather, but at this point not the Brewtools. That may change in the future, but none of this is colouring my opinion, that I can promise you. Let us begin with looking at the vital statistics of these brewing systems. For this section I will focus on the Brewtools 80 litre rather than the 40 litre, as it is the most direct competitor in terms of size to the other two systems. Firstly, here are the minimum maximum batch sizes for each of these. The numbers quoted are to the fermenter and are quoted in metric first, followed by imperial. This is certainly an important figure range that only the individual brewer can determine suitability-wise for themselves. The wider the range is, the more flexible it is, of course, but perhaps you will not utilise this flexibility if your only wish is to fill 3 corny kegs, which all three of these systems will do. Or maybe you wish to be able to brew for 1 keg from time to time rather than a full batch. The Brewzilla and the Brewtools have the advantage for 1 keg brews, as you will only have 1 spare litre of beer to bottle due to their lower minimum batch sizes of 20 litres compared to the G70's newly imposed 30 litre minimum batch size. It could also be said that your brewing volume interest now could change in the future. Most will buy a brewing system and keep it for a number of years after all. Another important consideration is the heating power on offer from the heating elements of the systems. This difference in power is noticeable in all of these, and the Brewzilla is noticeably faster at heating than the G70 due to its extra insulation combined with a more powerful heating element setup. However, the Brewtools has Tesla-like power compared to the other two that simply cannot be denied. Another plus in this power department goes to the Brewtools because its heating elements can be replaced if they fail. This is not the case with the other two systems, meaning that when the elements fail it is simply game over for the system. The Brewtools has 2 heating elements that each need their own power socket, but you are able to set the amperage for each of the 2 relays, meaning that the Brewtools has greater power flexibility. With the Brewzilla you have 3 separate heating elements that can be powered on or off separately, which gives some flexibility, but you cannot change the amperage. The G70 has a single heating element, but like the Brewzilla, no amperage flexibility, so if the G70 or Brewzilla is your choice, then ensure you have the right fuse level for its use wherever you take it. However, at least with the Brewzilla you can simply use 2 of the 3 heating elements and plug into a lower fuse level. Moving on now to maximum grain bill size with figures in metric and then imperial. As you can see, the Brewtools is leading the pack here, but it also has to support its larger batch size compared to the other two systems. Out of these 3 I've only tested maximum batch size in the Brewzilla 65 litre, which I can verify as a true figure, and more importantly the level of efficiency at this max batch size was reasonable. However, it should be mentioned that some manufacturers in this industry are basing their maximum grain bill figure on what can actually fit in the grain basket, rather than what it is actually a realistic figure for reasonable levels of efficiency. I have heard via the Brewtools community that its max batch size is realistic, but I am yet to hear any information relating to how well the G70 handles 17 kilos. Grainfather do state a 9 kilo maximum grain bill for the G30, and that was based on what would fit rather than what would be realistic. On the G30 the maximum amount I would suggest to mash would be between 7 to perhaps 7.5 kilos, which is obviously less than the 9 kilos stated. If you have a G70 and have tested 17 kilos, then please let us all know in the comments section how well this performed for you. Before we go any further, I think now is the right time to talk about price. Shown on screen are prices found in the US for these systems at the time of putting this video out. None of these prices include taxes or shipping, so factor that in also. These prices will vary depending on where in the world you are buying them. These are simply the US prices for easy comparison. As you can see, the Brewzilla is by far the cheapest. The G70 comes in next at almost but not quite 3 times the price of the Brewzilla. The Brewtools 80 litre model is the most expensive of all of these systems, being $740 more expensive than the G70. The Brewtools price shown reflects the price of the base system along with a starter pack for a 2-valve setup, which also includes a counterflow chiller, which brings it in line to what is supplied with the other two systems by default, and then some more. We will talk about value for money later as this is more relevant for many people, but let's delve further into what each of these systems offers with a closer look at them first. When it comes to quality, the overall winner here by a fair way is the Brewtools, but of course it has a premium price coming in at over 3.5 times the Brewzilla price. It features a thicker stainless steel body and much better quality components than the other two. When it comes to the bodies of the G70 and the Brewzilla 65 litre, it has to be said that they are of very similar quality on the face of things. But it should be mentioned that the internal finish of the G70 is surprisingly raw, with many visible welds on the internal bottom and all handle areas, which is where oddly the Brewzilla surpasses it. Let us now look at the temperature probes for each of these systems. It is after all a key area. The Brewtools features a very well placed and robust quality looking temperature probe, and the Brewzilla clearly has a cheaper smaller probe as you would expect at its price point, but I have found it to be accurate, and this is helped further by it being protected by a false bottom. The G70 has a very similar probe to the Brewzilla, but it is not protected by a false bottom, and users have already reported issues with this. Perhaps an upgrade will come later to address this. I did find the G70 temperature probe to be accurate though, and like the other systems it also features temperature calibration, which is a great feature. When it comes to other components like the grain basket and fittings, the G70 does enjoy a better quality level than the Brewzilla. It has to be said that some of these parts are heavier than needed though, and the money spent here would have been more value in the body. So as you can gather, the quality side in comparing the Brewzilla and G70 does vary. Moving on to a technology comparison now, and the most basic system here in terms of technology is the Brewzilla, as you would expect. Its controller does have preheat functionality as well as support for multiple step automatic mashing, but there is no Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. For some this will be all they need. Some see Bluetooth and Wi-Fi as technology for technology's sake when built into a brewing system. However, the Brewzilla systems do feature the very desirable and modern ultra-low watt density heating elements though, which are not found on other budget systems, so at this price point this really is something to be very happy about. When it comes to technology, the G70 controller does attempt to take this technology up some steps with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth and also the addition of a smart app for your tablet or phone. Both Android and iOS are supported. This technology is what some people see as the main justification of the higher pricing of the Grainfather products in the first place. As you can see, the information displayed on the controller is pretty basic, but it does tell you what you need to know, and that is what counts. During my testing of the G70 I came across various bugs in the smart app and also within the PID controller itself. Examples of these bugs have been shown in my previous G70 experience videos, within various firmware and software updates since launch late last year until very recently. It should be made clear that this is my experience, but if this was a system that I paid for, then frankly I would have returned it for a full refund. I know of other ex-owners who have done just that also. It is fair to say that other owners have had the same experience or worse experience, and experiences leading up to everything being fine compared to my own. This very wide range of differing user experiences is also seen with the Smart app in relation to both the G30 and the new G70, so clearly Grainfather still have some work to do with the G70 and their app before the user base as a whole will be satisfied. So really at this point things are rather like a lottery in this regard, in that you could strike it lucky or unlucky. I have to say that even if I had a flawless experience myself, the mere fact that this lottery situation exists makes this hard to recommend, and if you do decide to buy a G70 anyway, then you cannot say that you had no warning about this, as it is all over the internet. The bigger picture is important, and I really do not understand people with the attitude that say that if it works for them, then it is fine to recommend to others. I would like to add that I find this to be a great shame, and I hope that Grainfather do manage to resolve these issues in the near future. When the Grainfather system did work well, it provided a great platform for users to write and share recipes online. This information is then transferred to the controller, and then all the user has to do is follow the steps on their smart device until the brew was complete. You could monitor your brew from another room also, and only return back when there was a step that needed your interaction. I used to really enjoy this, but then things started to go wrong and the recipe creator became more and more inaccurate. Like many, I moved over to Brewfather for creating recipes instead, but still shared the recipe to Grainfather for the smartphone app alarms and sparge water counter. Then this side started to get more and more buggy as well as time went on, so then I resigned myself to using the G70 in manual mode instead, like many others. Then some months later the app then received a major update, and like many I was very disappointed with what it had become, so once again I went back to manual mode and just used Brewfather. A small minority of people in the Grainfather brewing community have taken offence to me speaking out about such things. One has even invented reasons behind this, but frankly it is because I am disappointed and frustrated, both at the same time, and I believe that part of what all Grainfather system owners have paid for is simply not being supplied in the usable state anymore. I had hoped that with the launch of the G70 that Grainfather will address all of this, but so far that has just not happened, and my testing of the app even many months later still reveals something that feels like a step back in general, rather than a step forward from the old app, that actually worked much better. Thankfully the app does seem to be safe for use now at least, but part of my disappointment and frustration has been the attitude and reactions from Grainfather in regards to the health and safety issues that the app had last year. I believe that this also raises very strong concerns about smart apps being used to control brewing systems in general. At this present time, Grainfather are the only company worldwide that offer one, and there has been simply years for other companies to respond, and none have. So to finalise, if you buy a G70 or a G30 for that matter, there really is no way of knowing if or how this technology will work for you when you get it, and into the future after updates. You should be in a position where you are happy to use the product manually, at least for periods. If not, then frankly you are setting yourself up for potential disappointment. The Brewtools is by far the most advanced of these systems when it comes to technology. Its screen is like a quality touchscreen tablet and is very snappy fast with it. What you can see on your screen now is the opening screen, and as you can see there are various options available right from the controller. Much of this has been updated since my review, so let's go through it. Here is the options area. Here you can set things like the relay amperage and power levels, as well as things like Wi-Fi and updates. The options are well laid out and certainly very easy to use. Here is a look at manual control. You can do a full brew from here, adjusting temperature and heating control as well as your timer on the fly. You can also adjust the heating power percentage as well as the pump power percentage via the sliders at the bottom of the screen. During the cooling phase you can also see the return temperature of your cooled wort as well as the temperature of the wort in the main kettle. There is also a recipe mode for semi-automation that works directly from the screen with no smartphone app needed, along with the potential issues that go along with it. Once it works for one, it works for all with no compatibility issues to worry about. That is part and parcel of the smartphone app market, sadly. This recipe mode is fully functional already, and a cloud service for recipe sharing is also coming. I was also told by the CEO of Brewtools that the cloud service will have an API as well as integration with Brewfather. This was also fully confirmed to me by the CEO of Brewfather, which is very exciting news. There is no ATA for the cloud service right now or further details, but you can be sure that this will be shared online when there is. The Brewtools also features a delayed start, or otherwise known as preheat functionality, that acts as a time saver. You simply enter the desired temperature and when you want it to start heating. This is certainly a very handy feature, and thankfully all of the three systems in this comparison have it. Let us now look at brewing experience. All of these units have the potential to brew much larger grain bills than smaller regular side brewing systems. 16 to 20 kilos may not sound like a lot, but once water is added, many will need someone to help lift the grain basket after mashing. You could opt for a winch system, but it is something to be aware of and factor into how much this is going to cost you and how and where you are going to use it. If you are looking for something that requires little setup time, learning or fuss that simply works, then the Brewzilla 65 litre will give you all of this and keep it within a modest budget. It is easy because it is basic, and for many this will be all that they need. It is also light enough to be easy to move around your brewing area during the various stages of the brew day. This all makes for a nice fast brew day with little to think about. Due to its powerful heating elements at 3.5 kilowatts, it heats very quickly, especially if you brew a 20 litre batch, which is a flexibility that I really value. The heating elements are also ultra low watt density, which as mentioned previously is almost unheard of within a budget system. The Brewzilla is supplied with a basic cooling spiral working on the immersion method, which is effective, but it has to be mentioned that these use more water compared to the counterflow chillers supplied with both the G70 and the Brewtools systems. Kegland do have a very reasonably priced counterflow chiller themselves that can be purchased, and there are also lots of other aftermarket options out there too. Personally, I've converted the one that came with my G30 so that it can be used with my Brewzilla, and it works very well. The Brewzilla is also a very easy system to clean due to its portability and design. This is helped along very nicely by having a large false bottom. It has handles on top and at the bottom of the system that make it easy to tip, and the cleaning method is very similar to other smaller all-in-one brewing systems, and this familiarity makes for a very short learning curve. Let's now move on to the G70. Now obviously at this point in time this system is not reliably working as intended, so currently the experience side is very much skewed, but let's put this aside for this section as if it is fixed, which at this point we just have to hope is possible. It could be a design fault that is responsible for why even after over 5 months this is still not working 100%. Let's hope not though. The G70 requires more setup time compared to a Brewzilla, but after this is done it is quite plain sailing, assuming that everything is working well for you, as discussed previously. It does have a wider learning curve than the Brewzilla, but it is pretty straightforward all the same, especially if you have owned a previous Grainfather system and are now used to how to set up within the app. That is, if you decide to use it. Whilst the G70 is not what I would call heavy, it certainly requires more muscle to move around compared to the Brewzilla, so sticking it on a platform with wheels would actually make an awful lot of sense. It also has to be said that the G70's controller offers a convenience in the height department due to it being top mounted. Both its competitors here have bottom mounted controllers, meaning that you will either need to put them on a short table for use or get on your knees. Not a big deal for many, but part of your consideration all the same. I have found the heating power on the G70 to be somewhat reserved, considering that it has a 3.2 kilowatt element since its release and to date. This has been a common observation. Whilst it would be wrong to say that it is slow, it does not meet with expectations, and heat up times really should be better. This could be simply down to something within the controller's firmware that is holding it back, so hopefully this is something that will in time be resolved. The G70 comes with a very capable counterflow chiller that is much larger than the one supplied with the G30. It does a great job, and for me at least is the best thing about the G70 in total. Grainfather have announced via the FAQ section of their website that the G70 pump may face issues if operated during a boil. So it should be noted that running boiling hot water through this counterflow chiller in the same way that users do with the G30 to sanitize may present a problem. See the Grainfather information on screen from the FAQ. I have found in my testing that you can run at temperatures a little lower than boiling point though, and on the brews that I did this on I had absolutely no issues. Alternatively, you could give the counterflow chiller a clean and sanitize before the brew, though I am guessing that having to do this will not please many people. Sadly, the cleaning method and setup that the G70 uses is not well designed in my opinion, and the filter supplied provides more issues than it solves. The end result of this means that the cleaning of the G70 requires much more time than these other two systems. The way forward as I found it was to remove all debris by hand and either limit the use of the filter or discard it totally. Naturally, this still makes the process more of a labour and time-consuming exercise, but at least it's better than what is intended. It is a pretty messy process, especially when compared to other systems including Grainfather's own G30. But once you are done at least. The Brewtools at first will provide you with the largest setup time and learning curve of these three systems simply because of its design features like the three-way valves and the valve that allows different areas of liquid flow within the system. The Brewtools is simply not a plug-and-play brewing system, but it does offer the brewer the opportunity of choice of how things are set up to suit the individual, which I am personally very much in favour of. It will need time invested in it before you brew with it, and I do suggest filling it up with water past the heating elements and testing everything out before you even engage the heating or do a brew. A great deal of thought has clearly gone into its design, so you should be in a position to invest at least an hour or so into fully understanding how to operate it and set it up. Once you have done a brew or two, then for many its operation becomes second nature and is simply a joy to use. I have used a very wide range of brewing equipment for home brewing and nothing is as good as this to my mind overall, but it has a very unique experience compared to the rest of the homebrew market and certainly will not necessarily be for everyone, of course, budget aside. Once you have the Brewtools set up the way you like it, then as long as you can leave it fully assembled or at least partially assembled, then this will reduce setup time, of course, and this is exactly what most users seem to do. The Brewtools was designed with a kitchen worktop being used as its base or a short table due to the bottom mounting of the controller. I have set the Brewtools on both for a brew and found it very manageable either way. Like the G70, this is not a lightweight system, but at 27.5 kilos for the 80 litre version it should be manageable enough when not full. With its two relays powering two heating elements for a total of 6 kilowatts, it is by far the fastest system here to heat, which of course will shave time off of your brew length. Part of the upgrade package is a 304 stainless steel counterflow chiller that works extremely well. I found that it does a pretty fast job considering when you recirculate back into the Brewtools, which is not the way it is intended to be used of course, but surprising and impressive all the same. I also very much like that I can monitor the chilled warp flow return temperature from the main controller. This is very useful and allows me to make adjustments when needed for optimal warp temperature depending on what my yeast is hoping for. When it comes to cleaning, the Brewtools makes things very simple and fast. By removing the centre pipework and adjusting the system valves, you can exit the remaining contents from your system directly into a bucket or whatever you choose as long as your exit pipe has enough length. You can also have recirculation going on during the cleaning, back into the system and at the same time through a hose. Some might argue if this is necessary, but I like to keep my hand in to make sure everything is covered. The cleaning of a Brewtool system has never presented me with any issues and no filters or messing around is needed. Great design simply provides the answers. Lastly, let's now finish off with value. Value for money is somewhat an attitude of mind, but I will explain my feelings here and you can make your own considerations. Firstly, it should be made very clear that the end beer that each of these systems produces is very comparable when brewed without issue. Some would say that because the cheapest system here brews a very comparable end beer, that this represents the best value for money because it is the end beer that is the most important thing in the end. This is not the whole picture though, as I see it. The lifespan of a product, no matter what it is, surely also has to come into play. The Brewtools is the only one of these systems that has 100% replaceable parts, so it has the longest potential lifespan. You can expect the Brewzilla and Grainfather to last 10 years, but this could be longer or shorter depending on how often it is used, how reliable the components turn out to be, and how well it is treated. Some could also argue that they would probably want to upgrade to a newer design brewing system within 10 years or maybe less. Technology is still moving fast after all, and it is also becoming cheaper. Then comes in the reality of your budget or what you think you can get away with if you are married. This would of course vary wildly for many different people. Sure, it should be pretty crystal clear by now that the Brewtools is the best of these three systems, but then of course that it is also massively more expensive than a Brewzilla and $740 more expensive than a G70, which is actually enough money to buy a Brewzilla outright plus some extras. I am happy to recommend both the Brewzilla and Brewtools systems and feel that for what is on offer they do represent good value at the least. Even if the G70 was happily working, then I still feel that for what is on offer the price is too high, and this is clearly a very common opinion, but you really need to decide this for yourself, of course. If you can easily afford a Brewtools, then that still does not mean that it is the right choice for you, but at least you have the pick of these three, which is more than many will be able to say. But only you can decide what something is worth to you, after all. One thing I'm very sure about is that out of these three there is no one best system for all, and that value is relative to your situation plus your wants and needs. I just hope that this comparison provided you with the facts and insight required so that you are closer to a decision than you were before, and that could obviously mean none of them. Whatever you decide, stay safe and happy brewing. If you would like to discuss this more, then please do so in this video's comments section or within this YouTube channel's Facebook group. This now brings this video to a close. If you have any questions, then please let me know via YouTube or Facebook. I do hope that you found this video to be useful, interesting and enjoyable. If appropriate, then please like this video on YouTube, and if you've not done so already, then please subscribe. I regularly post new content. Happy brewing!